A little bit of a late start, and that's 100% on me.
Morning, y'all.
All right, let's see. I've got the right page in here. It's what, the second? So Proverbs chapter 2. Should be page 731. My son, if you accept my word and hide my commands with you, so that you make your ear attend to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. For if you cry for discernment, lift up your voice for understanding. If you seek her as silver and search for her as hidden treasures, then you would understand the fear of Yahweh and find the knowledge of Elohim. For Yahweh gives wisdom. Out of his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. And he hides sound wisdom for the straight, a shield to those walking blamelessly, to watch over the paths of the right rule, or to watch over the paths of right ruling, and the way of his loving commitment, or the way of his loving committed ones he guards. Then you would understand the righteousness and the right ruling and straightness, every good path. For wisdom would enter your heart, and knowledge be pleasant to your being. Discernment would guard you, understanding would watch over you, to deliver you from the evil way, from the man who speaks that word, perversities.
Yes.
Yeah, perversities. Those who leave the path of straightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, rejoice to do evil. They delight in the perversities of evil, whose paths are crooked, and they are perverted in their ways, to deliver you from the strange woman, from the foreigner who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth, and has forgotten the covenant of her Elohim. For her house has sunken down to death, and her paths to the dead. None going into her does return, nor do they reach the paths of life. So walk in the ways of goodness, and guard the paths of righteousness. For the straight shall dwell in the earth, and the perfect be left in it. But the wrong shall be cut off from the earth, and the treacherous ones plucked out of it. So the live stream you were doing the other day, and Shalom Guitars and ARs, by the way.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. See Dana. What's up, Dana?
Yeah, I saw Dana had commented before we got going,
Travis,
and then
cool.
Travis, there you go. Shalom, bro. The live stream you were doing the other day when you were reading out of what you were going Matthew 24 and 25.
Yes, somewhere in there.
So a little bit of the comments that you had made on the righteous will remain, but the wicked will be the ones who are taken.
Mhm.
That was jumping out to me. So walk in the way of goodness and guard the path of the righteousness. For the straight shall dwell in the earth, and the perfect be left in it, but the wrong shall be cut off from the earth, and the treacherous ones plucked out of it.
Yeah, so what's interesting about that thought is, so outside of this whole rapture idea, something else that I'm just now kind of thinking about is I also had this misunderstanding back in my, Big C Christian church days, where it almost seemed like I didn't realize at the time that basically Yah was bringing heaven down to earth at the end of days, right? So I took it as, oh, we all die and then we go up there, or the inverse of that kind of thing, like just this big misunderstanding, really. And so with that, when you read verses like this, where like well the earth's still there, the perfect or the straight are still left in it, and all this, like it starts to really take you out of that thought. And so it was interesting coming out of churchianity and like seeing sometimes the deception, but also just like your lack of understanding in what you were taught. Um, so yeah, just and then you go to like Revelation and you get that picture of like the New Jerusalem coming down and him making his because you have the feast days where they're all indicative of the coming of Messiah and then the return of Messiah and uh, like this 1,000 years of peace and all this, like he will make his tabernacle with us and all that, like you just have an understanding earlier on, so that was an interesting part of it as well.
Well, I find it really cool that the layout of that mirrors the feasts. So
Mhm.
you have your fall feasts that pretty well line up with it. You have trumpets where uh, it is the proclaiming of the coming of the King. It's just, hey, everybody get ready. He's on his way. He's coming. Uh, and then you have uh, atonement, which is Judgment Day, uh, and he divides his people half on his left, half on his right. On his right, the people who were uh, sheep on one side, goats on the other. Uh, and I'm in 25 right now, so I say the right ones on the right side, not the say to those on his right hand side, come you blessed of my father, inherit the reign prepared for you from the foundation of the world. So those on his right are um, those who trusted him, those who are righteous, those who um, loved him when they saw other people, and those who are on his left were those who were not righteous, those who um, when they saw other people didn't love him, and indicative of uh, the the two goats for atonement. There's one uh, that is an offering to Yahweh, and then there's another that's taken outside the camp and thrown away. And so you have that line up, and then you have Sukkot, which will dwell with him forever, and millennial kingdom, new heaven, new earth, all of that just proceeds out of it because that's the eighth day. He's making everything new after that. Uh, it's so cool because he fulfilled the feasts in his first coming, and he's going to fulfill the other feasts in his second coming. And I'm just like, whoa. So I I found that so cool in compared to um, I grew up thinking that Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins from the Left Behind series were the people who wrote the Gospels, just because it's like, oh, it has to happen this way. Like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Good morning, Bertrand.
morning, Bertrand.
Shalom, shalom. Yeah, man, and I mean, if we're being honest, the whole and maybe back then it was more of I didn't care. I don't know. But this whole rapture idea, or being taken up, whatever it is,
Mhm.
never really stuck with me. It didn't make
Mhm.
sense. Because even then it was like, well, I don't know what makes any of us so worthy. Like,
Mhm.
I see the humanness, the brokenness. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, but we're not special. It's like, and then you really dig into it, and it's like, why is he even coming back in the first place?
Yeah.
You know, and you look at the grand scale of this proverb that we just read, the whole of chapter 2, and it's like laying the foundation of like, hey, first half let's seek righteousness, let's seek a straight path, rather than like, the because when it talks about this treacherous woman and stuff
Hmm.
throughout the Proverbs, it's this I don't know if you should call it a metaphor or what, but like this metaphor of like false worship,
Hmm.
going down the
Well,
wrong path.
it's a metaphor throughout the whole book
Yeah.
uh, of
So
her being number one. It's, you know, be wary of your adulterous heart, but you start realizing it's like, oh, okay, this is so much deeper than just on the surface. It's also our adulterous heart because we're chasing after things that are not Yah.
yeah,
So
it's funny when I realized that, because I
mhm,
used to really struggle with reading the Proverbs.
mhm.
Like, man, like, am I just that dumb? But it's in
No.
reality, it's just like you're missing a
Mhm,
little bit of an insight, and it's like it made the read a little easier because you're like, oh.
mhm.
And then I think we talked about it. I don't know if it was last time, but I had mentioned somebody made the distinction, or we had a discussion about how like the Proverbs, the way we somebody put it this way, and I thought it was good. Proverbs is like the cliff notes of the Torah, right? And it's just like it's a
Yeah.
quick reference to kind of go back and be like, oh yeah, that's right, I should probably do these things or whatever. And all those things kind of made it easier, because I know like sometimes you read this and you're like, dang, this is a lot of wisdom. This is a lot
Yeah.
of like above my head stuff, but in reality, it's just like it's hard to put 5 whole books of
Mhm.
just pure goodness into like 31 chapters.
Understood.
So when
Yeah.
you really condense it down, which I'm not saying that's what Solomon did when he wrote these, but
No, but
it kind of just lines up that way. So, but it helps.
I think it's one of those that because Solomon wasn't perfect by any means, but him realizing like, oh, hey, this stuff matters. Um, I think there was enough practicality in the actual doing of the law that he's like, oh, okay, yeah, this really does mean this. And yeah, Bertrand, we finally figured out how to make you a moderator. So thank you for bearing with me. I was kind of sweating last week when I kept pushing the moderator button and it wasn't working.
We're on page 731, kind of just trucking through
Yeah, and I'm
Proverbs
actually
2.
since we were talking about rapture theory, I was actually going to jump to Second Thessalonians 2, which
Mm,
is
yeah,
page
that's
1155.
a good
And
place
that's
to go with
just
that.
that's just that's just more of, hey, let's dissect this a little bit, because let's not just propose our
It's
theory and not defend it against something that people are going to use when, oh, hey,
it's
but what
funny.
about
It's
this?
like I think I'll let you read Second Thessalonians, but
Yeah.
it'll segue nicely into some stuff I kind of ran into last night. But
Okay,
anyways,
cool.
go
You
for it.
you go ahead and load yourself for bear on that end, and I'll fire the cannon on this end. Second Thessalonians 2. As to the coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah and our gathering together to him, we ask you, brothers, not to become easily unsettled in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, from as if from us, as if the day of Yahweh has come. Let no one deceive you in any way, because of the falling away is to come first, and the man of lawlessness is to be revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called Elohim or that is worshipped, so that he sits as Elohim in the dwelling place of Elohim, showing himself that he is Elohim. Do you not remember that I told you this while I was still with you? And now you know what retains or what restrains for him to be revealed in his time. For the secret of lawlessness is already at work, only until he who now restrains comes out of the midst. And then the lawless one shall be revealed, whom the master shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and bring to naught with the manifestation of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the works of Satan, with all power and sight and wonders of falsehood, and with all deceit of unrighteousness, in those perishing because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. And for this reason, Elohim sends them a working of delusion for them to believe the falsehood, in order that all should be judged who did not believe the truth, but have delighted in the unrighteousness. But we ought to give thanks to Elohim always for you, brothers, beloved by the Master, because Elohim from the beginning chose you to be saved in set apartness of spirit and belief in the truth, unto which he called you by our good news, for the obtaining of the esteem of our Master Yeshua Messiah. So then, brothers, stand fast and hold the traditions which you were taught, whether by word or by our letter. And our Master Yeshua Messiah himself, our Elohim and Father, who has loved us and given us everlasting encouragement and good expectation through favor, encourage your hearts and establish you in every good word and work. And that's
So it's
on
interesting.
and that's on commentary of as to the coming of the Master, Yeshua Messiah, and our gathering together to him. It's like, oh hey, be aware, be on guard. There's a deceiver coming as well.
Yeah, and so funny enough, yeah, Yeshua is coming and we will be gathered together to him, but what happens first, right? What happens
Yeah,
first is there is this deception. There's this lawless one and people are deceived.
exactly.
And so funny enough, last night I went to mom's for dinner, right?
Mhm.
It's just become the Thursday thing, I guess. So
Hey,
whatever.
there
That's
you go.
but anyways, I was over there for dinner, and a little bit before I left, we were talking about this.
Mhm.
At least I was talking about this. Um, because where it really started was I don't know how we got on the subject, but me and my brother were kind of going back and forth a little bit about, how I've come to understand,
Mhm.
and this comes from things that are a little above my head. I don't research rock formations and whatnot, but basically more and more evidence is coming out on the fact that there was a global flood, right?
Mhm.
And what that does is it completely craps on evolution theory,
Mhm.
right? And everything they said, and while I was bringing this up, my mom looked at me. She's like, "So you mean to tell me that the Earth isn't 6 million years old?" I'm like, or millions of years old or whatever.
Yeah.
It's only 6,000. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's exactly it. And you know why? Because all of that theory that they've had on how the
Mhm.
Earth is millions of years old is completely disproved based on their own research if you add in the account of a global flood.
Mhm.
But they all deny that because if they don't deny it, then they don't have a theory anymore. It's completely bunk, right? But there was a global flood. It's biblical, and it came with we are probably talking about animals or something,
Mhm.
and I was like, yeah, no, dude, dinosaurs 100% existed. They were biblical, and I think they got wiped out in the flood.
Mhm.
Majority of them. I think that's how they went extinct. Not this, we've never had a meteor that hit this Earth that was that detrimental because it's not in this book, right? And so, anyways, it was that kind of topic, and they were kind of looking at me all crazy, like, "Wow, what do you mean?" And blah blah blah. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Well, here's the thing: is like this book tells you what you need to know. It leads you in the direction if you just have the eyes to see and the ears to hear,
Mhm.
and use a little bit of your own brain power. Like, don't let man deceive you. And I guess that kind of brought on this conversation of deception. And I'm starting to see, in my own family of like the
Mhm.
man has been deceiving you your whole life and you just like accepting it.
Mhm.
And so I kind of started harping on it. I'm like, look, read the book.
Mhm.
Like, if you're deceived already about these things because you trust man's word and their scientific study more than you do this book, like, there's a problem here because I think we all feel it. Like, very well could be that harder times are coming, that deception is coming,
Mhm.
and we're promised that, or told that rather, that a great deception is coming.
Mhm.
And many will be deceived. And not only that, Messiah says, hey man, the days are going to be shortened because if they weren't, even the elect would be deceived. Like, that's how bad it's going to get. And I started speaking hastily because I was concerned for my family. I was like, guys, understand. I say this out of love, and it wasn't being received. Like, they
Mhm.
were very uninterested in the conversation, but it was that important to me. I would not shut up. I'm like, guys,
Mhm.
I love you. I don't want you to be deceived. I know this is coming.
Mhm.
The writing is on the wall. And
Mhm.
the problem is, we're not being taken up. That's complete bunk. And I don't think either one of them necessarily believe that either. Me and
Mhm.
my brother have had discussions at length about, rapture theory, and we both agree that it's just bunk.
Mhm.
It's not in this book. But, I'm like, guys, it's really the war is on truth and deception.
Mhm.
That's what this is. That's what's in this book, and it's the fact that Yah gives us His truth, and all man
Mhm.
does is try to detruthify it. They try to
Mhm.
turn it the other direction. They try to they lie to you so that you turn away from Him.
Mhm.
And clearly, it works already, and yet there's going to be this system put in place and indoctrination that comes along with it where many will be deceived and
Mhm.
they're gonna take the mark because they don't have it figured out for themselves,
Mhm.
and so I made it a rather large point to harp on that. I'm like, guys, just please use your own brain, read your word, don't even take my word for all this. I submit to you that I'm not lying to you, but you got to see it for your. I've given both of them a copy of the scriptures,
Mhm.
and I don't think that was or for no reason at all. Now it's up to their own responsibility to dig into it, but I
Right.
planted that seed, and I'm like, it's there.
Mhm.
Look into
100%.
it.
100%.
So interesting that we are. I find it no coincidence that we kind of landed there
Mhm.
as a talking point this morning, nor that Friday night. That's
Mhm.
kind of where the live stream was, which
Mhm.
or was it Friday night? No, it wasn't Friday. I think it
I
was
think that was your
Tuesday.
Tuesday night. Because you
Uh,
were going through the Gospels.
it was
So,
no coincidence that I
Mhm.
just happened to be reading there. Like, it was not planned. That's just
Mhm.
where we left off, and it's like, yeah, for whatever reason, this week made it kind of like a pretty valid point of like, hey, like, people ready so they aren't deceived like that.
Mhm.
That's going to happen at some point. I'm like, dang.
so, so
So,
your number one passage that people will use for the rapture, 1 Thessalonians 4, uh, and I'm normally people who bring it up, they're gonna start in verse 13. I'm gonna start in front of that, and then I'm gonna go further than they usually go, because I think this reveals just a little bit more.
mhm.
Also points out a few things that some people seem to ignore for some reason. Um, Starting at the beginning of verse 4, and I'm on page 1152 if anyone wants to follow along. For the rest of them, brothers, we beg you and call upon you in the Master Yeshua, that as you received from us how you should walk to please Elohim, you should excel still more. For you know that what what commands we gave you through the Master Yeshua. For this is the desire of Elohim, your set apartness, that you should abstain from whoring, that each one of you should know how to possess his own vessel in set apartness and respect, not in passion of lust, like the nations who do not know Elohim, not to overstep and take advantage of his brother in the Master, because the Master is the revenger of all such, as we indeed said to you before and earnestly warned. Elohim did not call us to uncleanness, but in set apartness. Therefore, he who rejects this does not reject man, but Elohim, who also gives us his set apart spirit. And it is not necessary to write to you about brotherly love, for you yourselves are taught by Elohim to love one another. For in fact, you do so towards all the brothers who are in all Macedonia. But we call upon you, brothers, that you do so more and more, and to make it your ambition to live peaceably, and to attend to your own, and to work with your own hands as we commanded you, so that you behave deceitly towards those who are outside, and not to be in any need. Or I'm sorry, that I misspoke. So that you behave decently towards those who are outside, and not to any who are in need. Just had a brief flashback to there was a rendition of the Bible that was printed in 1620 or 1630 that they accidentally left out "do not commit adultery." They said "do commit adultery," so that was a mistake, and that's actually how we got the term. That's actually how we got the term Holy Bible, because the reprinting that happened like right after, because everybody caught it. The reprinting that happened right after, they're like, no, it's "do not commit adultery," because they're like, we're going to call it the Holy Bible now instead of just the Bible, because it has all the appropriate do's and do nots. But yeah, so that you behave decently, not deceitfully. So that you behave decently towards those who are outside, and not be in any need. Now, brothers, we do not wish you to be ignorant concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you be sad as others who have not, or who have no expectation. For if we believe that Yeshua died and rose again, so also Elohim shall bring with him those who sleep in Yeshua. For this we say to you by the word of the Master, that we, the living who are left over at the coming of the Master, shall in no way go before those who are asleep. Because the Master himself shall come down from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the chief messenger, and with the trumpet of Elohim, and the dead in Messiah shall rise first. Then we, the living who are left over, shall be caught away together with them in the clouds, and meet the Master in the air, and so shall we always be with the Master. So then encourage one another with these words. And that section 13 to 18, that's like your common passage people are going to bring up about the rapture. I find it very interesting that is on the tail end of Paul basically reminding everyone, is like, hey, y'all best act right. Like, hey, remember what we taught you. You guys need to, be kind to one another. You need to obey the commandments that we taught you, and that's ignored by a lot of people. Like, hey, don't go whoring after your own heart and after what your heart wants to chase. Seek Yahweh above all else. Like, hey guys, bringing up that kind of stuff. Jumping into chapter 5 immediately on the tail of this, and this is where they stop reading most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, brothers, as to the time and the seasons, you do not need to be written to, for you yourselves know very well that the day of Yahweh comes as a thief in the night. For when they say peace and safety, then suddenly destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon the pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. Destruction.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. For you are the sons of the light, the sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of the darkness. So then we should not sleep as others do, but we should watch and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But we who are of the day should be sober, putting on the breastplate of the belief and love, and the helmet of the expectation of deliverance. Because Elohim did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain deliverance through our Master, Yeshua Messiah, who died for us, so that we, whether awake or asleep, should live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build up one another, as indeed you do. But, brothers, we beg you to know those who labor among you and are over you in the Master and admonish you, and to hold them in the highest regard in love because of the work. Be at peace among yourselves. And we appeal you, brothers, warn those who are disorderly, encourage the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, and be patient with all. See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone, but always pursue what is good, both for yourselves and for all. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing in all circumstances. Give thanks, for this is the desire of Elohim and Messiah Yeshua for you. Do not quench the spirit. Do not despise prophecies. Prove them all. Hold fast what is good. Keep back from every form of wickedness, and the Elohim of peace himself set you completely apart in your entire spirit, being and body. Be preserved blameless at the coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah. He who calls you is trustworthy, who also shall do it. Brothers, pray for us. Greet all the brothers with a set apart kiss. I charge you by the Master that is this letter be read to all set apart brothers. The favor of the Master Yeshua Messiah be with you. Amen. So find it interesting that he's building up everybody, and it seems to be an encouragement for what's coming, but also it's like, hey, don't be caught asleep when this happens, which is interesting. If it's don't be caught asleep when this happens, he's talking about coming like a thief in the night. He's talking about being overtaken by destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. Interesting, because he's talking about being overcome by destruction. So it sounds like stuff's going sideways. And when this happens, the portion that everyone describes as what is rapture theory, 13 through 18 on chapter 4. From everything I understand, he's addressing the church, saying, "Hey, I know you're worried about those who have already died, but when Yeshua does come back, he's bringing them with him, and we're going to meet him." And that is in line with a lot of imperial language. Essentially, it's like, hey, the emperor's coming back, and everybody goes outside of the gates to meet the emperor, and then like brings him back in, and they actually reinstall the emperor on the throne. It's more in line with that than the idea of, hey, everyone's just going to be snatched away, and then people are going to be wondering why everybody disappeared, because there's none of that talked about in this passage. It is heavily focused on Yeshua and his people, and it's not talked about like, oh, hey,
everybody's gone, and then you're going to have all the unbelievers who are wondering what's happening. That's not mentioned in here. So this information seems more indicative of the end of the age of this world than at some random time people going to get snatched up, and then the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket after that. That information is not in this passage. So it's a stretch, in my opinion, for
Oh yeah.
someone to say that, like, oh, hey, everyone's just going to disappear at some point in the coming future.
So you back it up to verse 4 in chapter 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you, brothers, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief.
Mm-hmm.
For you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. So then, we should not sleep as others do, but we should watch and be sober, right? And for those who sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. So, anyways, number one, we should watch and be sober. For what, right? If he was just gonna come and sporadically take us up, like, okay, well that's
Shalom, Brian Barnes, by the way.
that's definitely
Good to
not
see
what
you
he's
here.
talking about. It's more of like, hey, watch and be sober. Some weird stuff's at afoot. But also, if it didn't matter, right? If it didn't matter whether or not that day came or not, because we were going to be taken up anyways, why would he make us light? Why would we be sons of light? Is light not meant to go shine in the darkness?
100%.
Like, and that was something I was telling them too. I'm like, hey, bro, I get that it sucks having this idea of being in absolute, like, the worst times ever seen on this earth, the way Messiah described it, right? Yeah, it's not a very sobering thought, but why would we be here, right? Why does he just like want us to suffer? No. What that tells me is we have a job to do. And I think this verse kind of hints at that. Is like, hey, bro, we're meant to go and be a light. Like, the world's going to get much darker than it already is. And it seems pretty pitch black already. We're going to need some light to be able to see and bring people out.
I find it interesting. You look at all the times where Yah smoke checked somebody, and you're like, oh wow, that's pretty bad. They were done messing up so much that they did get smoke checked. And then you look at the state of the world today, and it's like, how much worse does it have to get?
Oh, much worse.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think that, like, man, this is crazy. We've never seen times like this. Like, yeah, well, you think that now. Like, it's crazy to think that it gets worse, but it does.
Well, and
you
then you have Solomon, who has the audacity to write that there's nothing new under the sun. Just a few pages after where we started today, that wickedness has been going on since pretty quick after the second or third page in this book. And you have situations where every inkling of the heart is evil. Every desire of someone is evil. And we look around and think, wow, it's bad. Like, but just how much worse? I don't know. I'm trying to remember the passage that talks about that they were inventing new ways to be evil. It's just slipping from my mind, so I don't know exactly where that one is.
We kind of go back to, like,
yeah.
Oh, sorry,
I was going to circle back to Proverbs too, but
oh, well, I just had this like slight thought of so you go back to like the Tower of Babel and what was going on then, right? And at first glance, it's like, oh, they were trying to build this tower and reach up to heaven. Maybe they were trying to overthrow God. And it's like,
Mm.
maybe. But you look in greater context, you had this nation that was like, for the first time in my understanding, human history, where there was so much unity and they weren't using it for good. Like, it wasn't like the unity of the body of the church or something. It was like they all had one language. They were this super nation. The system was arising and they wanted to like overthrow all of the earth and rule over it.
Mm.
And what does Yah do then? It's like, oh no, it's not time for that yet. So he scatters them all about, confuses their language and all that. And so this idea of like, of course, Tower of Babel, Babylonia, all this, like, the same imagery used in Revelation. Hey, come out of her, my people. You know, the whore of Babylon, yada yada. It's like this revamping of that idea, where we're gonna unify as a world, as one super nation, and like take this thing over. And like they were trying it then, but he was like, nope, it's way too early for that. So we're gonna put that off over here. Like that's what I see in that.
Yeah,
And it's
well,
like
and the
we've been there for a while. It's just like y'all's been putting it off because there's a time for this.
exactly. Well, and the coming together of people is not where the issue is, and I know you're not talking about that because there is a time where people coming together, but it's for the right reasons because you have
Mhm.
people who are organizing uh, in Genesis, and they've been told to fill the whole earth,
Right.
and so almost they're gathering together at that point is almost an act of rebellion because they're refusing to spread out, be fruitful, and multiply. They're staying right there, uh, and then yeah,
First
hey,
make
they're
it on earth.
right, and then they're building this city, and then they're building this tower, uh, and so is that the wrong part in and of itself? I don't know. Like we're getting into a lot of semantics on that, but I would say the
Yeah.
real question would be why. And going into what you're talking about is were they going in and trying to overthrow Elohim? It's very possible. Like you read some of the extra biblical texts, and that really seems to be the motivation in what's going on. Uh, but Yah makes the comment. He's like, "Hey, look, they're setting their mind to this, and they potentially can do this." And then, boom, hey, everybody now speaks a different language, which must have been really interesting to watch. Like, oh, hey, toss me the next brick, and like, um, the chaos that must have come from that must have been crazy. Um, but we see at the end of the book that everything ends in a city, and it's good. Uh, because the New Jerusalem coming down, and it's his design at that point. Um, so you look at a lot of sin, a lot of wickedness. A lot of times, the root of it may not be that bad, but timing is definitely off, and motivation is 100% off. And like I'll just throw this one out there, like sex. Sex is beautiful if it's within the confines of marriage. Wanting it outside of marriage, wanting it on your terms, on your timing, is where you're getting into whoring, is where you're getting into being sexually immoral. Uh,
Mhm.
so the corruption of what's good, uh, wanting the coming together of everybody in Genesis 11, where they're doing the Tower of Babel, uh, that desire of people coming together isn't bad, but why were they coming together? Uh,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, hey, we're doing it for all the wrong reasons. What's the heart motivation? I mean, and that's something that when my circumcision video drops in, I'm thinking I'm going to drop it Wednesday, um, probably. I've got a CTO's video that's just the how to that's dropping on Monday, and I'm thinking I'm going to drop the circumcision video on Wednesday. because everything, the people that I was going to send it to in advance, I already have. And the brother who had the questions on it originally, he's gotten back to me on it. So I feel pretty confident in releasing it. But that's a theme in that whole video is motivations the whole way through. And I see that so much in scripture, that yes, it is what's right and what's wrong, but a lot of what determines is what's the motivation that's behind it. Because doing the right thing for all the wrong reasons is just as bad. So like, where's your heart in it? Anyway,
Good point. Very good point.
so soapbox aside, I'll stand down now. Getting back into Proverbs too. It's really just more of the same. He hides sound wisdom for the straight, a shield to those walking blamelessly, to watch over the paths of right ruling, and the way of his loving committed ones he guards. Then you would understand righteousness and right ruling and straightness, every good path, for wisdom would enter your heart, and knowledge be pleasant to you, or to knowledge be pleasant to your being. Discretion would guard you, understanding would watch over you, to deliver you from the evil way, from the man who speaks perversities, those who leave the paths of the straightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil. They delight in the perversities of evil, whose paths are crooked and are perverted in their ways. To deliver you from the strange woman, from the foreigner who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth, and has forgotten the covenant of her Elohim. For her house has sunk down to depth, and her paths to the dead. None going into her does return, nor do they reach the paths of life. So walk in the ways of goodness and guard the paths of righteousness, for the straight shall dwell in the earth, and the perfect be left in it. But the wrong shall be cut off from the earth, and the treacherous ones plucked out of it. Everything we've been talking about pretty well goes full circle to that.
Yeah.
Is that we're either walking in righteousness, we're seeking Yah above all else, or we're chasing after something that's not of Him.
Pretty plain and simple there, yeah. You kind of go back through, let's see where it starts. I don't know, I guess like verse 6 through around 9, 10. That whole part is kind of like building up this idea of walking blamelessly, righteousness, like walking in the commands. It's interesting to see. So like, because I have a little note here. So in verse 7, you have how he is a shield to those walking blamelessly, right? And then so you go through to watch over the paths of right ruling, and the way of his lovingly committed one he guards guards, almost like guards to do, right? Then you would understand righteousness. So walking blamelessly, watching over the paths of right ruling, guarding over his commands, kind of ties right back into righteousness. Like, what is righteousness? Blamelessly walking in the commands, right? Right ruling, straightness, every good path. And you see the word guard in here a lot, particularly associated with walking in his ways. And it constantly reminds me, like, over and over in the, in the Torah, he says, guard to do my commands. Like, he specifies that word guard a lot.
Mhm.
And that's an interesting word to use too. Like, why would you have to guard the commands? Like, he doesn't just say, hey, go do the commands. He's like, guard to do them. And I think you do. Like, I think you should guard them. Like, you should preserve them. You should walk in them. You should study them. You should hold them
Well,
near.
if you're guarding them, what's your proximity to them? That's the real question. Are
Mm,
you
yeah.
like one of the DEI hire Secret Service agents who standing way off to the side and like, oh, wait a second, we need to go over there, and then you know he's 6'4" and you're 5 foot nothing, and trying to cover his shoes, I guess, because it's really about all that's going to get covered. Or are you right beside him the whole time? Are you, hey, how close are you supposed to be to the protectee at that point? Are you going to be 15 feet away, or are you going to be right on top of them? I would think that the guard implies, not completely, but I would think it implies proximity. It would also imply deeply knowing him,
Yep.
because you think about someone who is in that position, actually going to be shoulder to shoulder in a lot of cases. When I worked in the prison system, the a lot of the people would be called guards, and we'd make the distinction between a guard and an officer. A guard guards uh, something, whereas an officer is in charge of people. The That was a distinction, but whatever you want to call them, they're in proximity to the people that they're watching over, to the point where you're going to have conversations with people, where you're going to get to know them in the good times and in the bad, to the point where you're going to be the one delivering bad news to them at a certain point, because it's every day, all day. You're going to see them at their best. You're going to see them at their worst, and that's a proximity thing. Yeah, do you have someone up in a tower way over that way? Sure, they've got a job too, but there's also the day to day aspect that comes into it, and I find it interesting on the word guard, because I think that it heavily implies proximity. I don't think that's its only function, but just where my mind goes.
No, well, I think that was beautifully put, though. Like, that was I never really thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Yeah,
really
and
glad you brought that up.
I don't know that that's all of it, because I think
No.
guarding it implies as well that you're going to examine your own heart and
Mhm.
see that your heart's not taking it and running away with it somewhere that it doesn't need to go. I think that is implicit in it as well, because there's keeping things out and then there's keeping things in. So we want to make sure that, when we are guarding to do the commandments, that we're not adding to it, we're not taking away from it. There's that. Um, and I think there's enough of people talking about that isn't really novel to any of us. Uh, but yeah, my mind just jumps to the proximity side of it too. Is like, are you actually in Scripture enough to know the difference between what sounds true and what actually is true?
Yeah, and to me that checks out a lot, because how can you how can you walk and do something
Mhm.
that you're not very familiar with? That would be like me, tearing apart this motor that I got at work,
Mhm.
but I don't know jack squat about
Mhm.
vehicles. It just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. But rather, I'm doing it because I've been entrusted with that job based on my track
Mhm.
record, my understanding, and like
Mhm.
my familiarity with the work already. I know enough about the vehicle and the systems to actually start breaking it down with confidence and not be, so intimidated and walking failure. So that makes a lot of sense to me where,
Mhm.
you can't really I think a big part of the guard, now that you mention it, is being close to it. Like you can't
Mhm.
guard something if you're not close to it. So that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm. Just reading some of the comments. Brian Barnes, that makes sense. Thinking in military terms, you have the Army and the Navy that goes to war, but the National Guard and the Coast Guard's priority mission is to protect the homeland. Yeah, instead of going and bombing into freedom and democracy into the other countries way off over here, you have people who are closer by who are guarding the homeland.
Hmm.
Let's see, proximal and the intimate sense of duty to guard. Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of at the all of this that we've been talking about. Uh, find it interesting, just the thread that he has woven all the way through. That
Hmm.
if you're seeking him, he's gonna show you more and more. Uh, versus okay, let's just open a passage and it be isolated. It's like, man, this is all woven together very, very intimately throughout his book. So
100%.
I just
And it like keeps your motivation going, keeps your interest intrigued. Like you want more. Like he
mhm,
has this awesome way of making you want and desire, not like forces you, but you just like you're like, dude, how am I missing all this stuff? Like the more you kind of start to pick up, I mean, the fact that you could sit in the Torah for 70 years before you even grasp a fullness of understanding of, and that's just the first 5 books, man. And it's
yeah,
like, yeah, and then he's got like all this cool stuff in the back that just translates
yeah.
right back into it. And it's like,
It's got
man,
61 more after those first five that um,
yeah, how long
get a
then?
yeah
Oh.
get a good get a good understanding of the first five, and then oh hey, that's your lifespan right there. Uh, yeah, it's just it's
So then,
amazing that his word resonates with. You have people who, for lack of a better word, and I don't know that this is the best description, but you have people who are very simple minded, and connect deeply with his word, and then you have people who are the most learned, the most scholarly, that are in his word and are still not finding everything. Uh, and I think that is so cool that uh, he will meet us where we are, but he's not going to leave us there. So that's
and it's pretty cool too because even in the difference of how those two people think, like they definitely learn from each other too. Like the simple minded sees something some way that this more complex thinker can't, and vice versa. And like you just like you somehow learn from each other.
yeah. Well, I mean, you have case in point, like my 3-year-old has said some very profound things that I'm sure like he hasn't even considered the weight of. But it's like, oh no, that's legit. Uh, and, there's a reason they say out of the mouths of babes, and just right there. But then too, like you have people who are very wise, very learned, and then the real question is like how often are they even taking their own advice? Because I mean, I know I've given advice that I haven't taken.
Yep.
So, because I mean, how often is it like, man, this what I'm saying to you is just as much for me that it is for you? Because like I need to rebuke myself on this. So, like number one, I don't think any of us have got it all the way figured out. Um, and more importantly than any of that is we need to be clinging to Him so much more. We need to be actually in that proximity to His Word tenfold what we already are. So, like, what else is worth our time more than what we can learn out of this book, more than what we can apply out of this book, and not just be stuck reading it, but actually going out and living it? Because I mean, if we're just feasting on His Word all the time, but we're not actually going and doing, there's that too. So,
For sure.
doers of the Word, not just hearers. Strive to be learned, but it's a daily quest to learn to walk in the path. Every time I open the Word, I'm learning more about myself. And Father, praise you. Great job, Bertrand. That's awesome. Guitars and ARs, absolutely. I thought I knew His Word well until I started actually reading it, and was blown away with how much I missed.
Yeah.
Dude, I open this book all the time, and just like, oh, whoa, and I've read this before. It's like, oh no, there's more. There's more. You know, if you're a Doctor Who fan, it's bigger on the inside.
Dude, and you know what's funny? I don't know if you ever had this. I'm sure you have. I'm sure many of us have. But you ever open the Word one time and maybe you're going through some stuff, maybe you're not, doesn't matter. But you just open the Word and you immediately get rebuked. Just
Oh yeah,
you
100%.
get hit with a ton of bricks. You're like, ah.
100%.
Like that. Sometimes those are the best times.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, that was a good reminder. You're right. I need to be more intentful with that.
Before we get going, do you want to pray us out?
I can do that. Good morning, Heavenly Father. Father God, thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for the people that you have brought here, fellowship this morning, and to dig into your word. Father, I pray that throughout everything we read and discussed, that each one of us take what we need for our day, and that it helps us and guides us to walk in closeness to you today, to just be your light in this dark world. Help us to shine forth into the darkness. The darkness cannot overcome it. Father, we praise you for the many miracles that you work in and around us. Father, we thank you for the healing that you have brought others. Father, we pray that you continue to do that. And on behalf of all of those asking for prayer right now, I just pray that you draw close to all of them, that you would be with them, that you would comfort them in their time of mourning, and just be with all of your people today, that you would build us up in reproof and instruction to better walk in your word. Father, we love you. We thank you for this day that you have given us. Help us to rejoice in it. Father, it's in your Son's mighty name, Yeshua. Amen.
Amen. Oh,
Bless
tell you
you,
what,
Bertrand.
thank you, Bertrand. I appreciate it. Tell you what, Hoot, I'm usually given a benediction before we give out of here, why don't you speak some truth into the 6 people that are here with us?
Benediction,
How,
huh?
yeah, how should they go about their day today?
Bro, you should go be a light.
100%.
And so we say that a lot, and maybe a little bit of a benediction with that is in the last couple of weeks I've really thought about, okay, what does the light look like? What does being the light look like? And it could be as simple as like go talk to that person you need to talk to. You know who they are, and you know what you need to say. The Spirit's got that conviction on your heart. Go do it. Um, go be a killer at what you do, and let it be a blessing to somebody else. You know, I work on vehicles. Like I got a job right now that pays 11 hours. I've had it for this entire week. I'm taking a pay cut, which is part of the business. Like it really is. I'm not even tripping about it. But you know, at the end of the day, I have this guy who's really counting on me to do my job right, but also in a timely manner. Even though this particular job that I have, I've been blessed to have it for the first time. I've never done it before, so I'm learning a lot and I'm taking my time. But needless to say, I'm trying to get that out as fast as I can while also doing it right to be a blessing to that guy so that he doesn't have to come back. You know, read your word with somebody that needs it. Encourage other people. Pray with somebody. Like, just be good in a bad world, if you will. Like, go be the light, dude. And just keep him at the forefront of your mind, you know? Let's see. I feel like there might be something else. You are loved.
100%.
That's a big one. A lot of times you get in a place and you're like, oh my goodness, the world is ending. No, it's not. Not yet, at least. Right? Still stands. You have a job to do. He put you here because he trusts you with that job.
100%.
So go do it, you know? Like, be happy, be thankful, be praising him that you're here. It's not a mistake.
100%.
And
Shalom,
no?
everybody.
Thought you were gonna say like go do hard things.
Yeah, I am going to say go do hard things. Go do hard things, everybody. Shalom.
Shalom.